Hi, everyone. Today on Embodied, I sit with Dr. Ellen Vora. She's a psychiatrist and the author of The Anatomy of Anxiety. This episode with Ellen is really a love letter to your nervous system. I mean, some people calm your system the moment they arrive. Ellen, since the first time I've met her, that is what she does. In this episode, we talk about embodied mental health. We talk about the difference between false and true anxiety, and also making rest a right, not a reward. I can't wait to share this with you. Hi, Ellen.
Hi, Anne.
It's so good to see you.
It's really good to see you.
Mm. I am so excited about our conversation today because since I've met you about almost a year ago now, um, what I love the most about you was the quality of your presence. And I remember we were in the pool in Hohai at this hotel, and there was just this knowing that you were so present and so embodied with your energy. And it just felt comforting and calm and knowing that, oh, I think I might have found a soul sister here that kind of loves to move through the world, in a similar way that I do. So since then, I've been looking forward to being in conversation with you. So thank you so much for accepting the invitation to be on the podcast today.
I had the exact same feeling, and I imagine I share something that a lot of your listeners feel, which is that you use your presence and your voice medicinally, and anyone who comes into your orbit, even in the form of listening to your podcast, is then syncing up and entraining their nervous system with you, co-regulating with that. And then there's loving kindness that comes through in your voice. And so this is such an honor to be a part of this.
Thank you for saying that. I never thought of my voice as being medicine or being part of the healing thing. So that's really sweet. That makes me think. um, I think I saw that in one of your interviews that you've done on a podcast, this energetic exchange between people that's always happening, right? There's always this connection and, either you feel welcomed, in the exchange, or either, you feel, oh, I don't know if I should, and I love when we get to use our bodies like that as a discernment tool for um, what is good for us and what is maybe not good for us in that moment. And that's my favorite part of your book. So we're going to talk about your book today, your beautiful book, The Anatomy of
Oh.
Anxiety, is that it's completely a body approach to mental health.
Yeah, long overdue.
Long overdue. Absolutely. Because, and I think you mentioned at some point too in the book, by the way, it's beautiful. Like, thank you for writing it. It's gorgeous. It's thorough. And it's research based, but it's also warm and accessible. Like how that's hard to do because you're a psychiatrist. Like you are a very brilliant intellectual person. And then you made it so accessible and digestible and warm and vulnerable at the same time. It's pretty special.
Thank you. I appreciate that feedback, and especially considering that I'm in the process of writing my second book now. Any encouraging words really help get me through the next paragraph. And so,
Oh, goodness. Well, so this is something I wanted to share with you about the writing because hopefully we're not going on too big of a tangent here, but my first two books they've been living in me for so long that they came out really quickly. Like, okay, this is my story and this is my approach. This is how I do things. And then now it's out. And then this book that I'm working on right now, and I don't know if it's similar with you, but it's not like it's there. It's coming through and it needs a different level of patience, of co-creation, of allowing. So I don't know if that's what you're experiencing or something similar, but I say that sometimes it's playing games with my mind because I am also quite in my intellect, like it is. That's why I do the work that I do. And I'm like, this is not the same kind of book.
And you're speaking my soul right now because yes, my first book was it was the culmination of lectures I had given and teachings I had done and scripts I had written. I thought that I could write that book in my sleep. And even that was an incredibly difficult book to write. The one I'm writing right now, it's called Season of the Witch. This book is something that does not yet exist. It is coming into existence as I write it. It's almost like a jazz improvisational jam session that I'm having with myself as I write. And I'm trying to listen for what does the music need in any given moment. It's completely different. And it is, I think we're embarking on a similar project, which is really drawing on both hemispheres of the brain because we're trying to access something ineffable that we're receiving as a download. I experience it as through the right hemisphere. Maybe it's through the cerebellum. Maybe it's through the heart or the gut or the womb. I don't know. We're receiving it through some kind of radio signal. And then we're translating it through our left hemisphere, the hemisphere that has language and linear thought and reason and logic. And so we're trying to take something fundamentally ineffable. It's the amorphous stew of truth in the universe that really takes more of the shape of vibration or music. And then we're trying to translate it into words. And that's a fun project. I enjoy taking the ineffable and effing it.
No big deal. It's just so different. And I think that you described it so well. And it can't be pushed and it can't be controlled. And I think I could control the other ones a little bit better. I could say, I'm just going to put my head down and finish this book. Not with this, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. Even as the writing process has gone along, I've noticed I've had to have certain life experiences that unlock the next what the book needed of me, and I didn't even have it within me when I embarked upon the writing experience. So it's I'm writing, I'm growing along with the book, and that's informing it. And it's funny, I don't even remember exactly how this came to pass, but I was in a conversation with someone. They reminded me of a story around the context of my mom's passing. And then it hit me that that was what the last chapter of the book was missing. But I was never going to get there just putting my head down and pushing this book. It needed to emerge organically in a dynamic with someone else. And there it was, a missing piece.
Yeah.
But it comes only when I was actually ready.
Yes, exactly. It has its own timing. Hmm. So your your first book, The Anatomy of Anxiety, um, let's talk a little bit about that one because my sense is that it's for everyone. And as a professional in the mental health care, would you say that everybody at some point in their life suffers from anxiety?
I wouldn't necessarily say that. I
Okay.
would say that, I mean, even calling it the anatomy of anxiety was a little bit of a sneaky trick because the suggestions in it, while they are a bit bespoke and catered toward anxiety, the beauty of the human body is that if you put these practices in into place in your life, it will heal however you uniquely get out of balance. And so I really identified anxiety as the way many people are subjectively experiencing their imbalance. I call it the pH of our age. Like when we're out of balance today, we feel it as something we call anxiety. I think that there have been ages when people feel melancholy, for example, and I still think the same strategies apply. So I don't actually experience all that much anxiety. I have certain corners and pockets of my life where I have what I would call anxiety, but it's not my overarching kind of where my nervous system hangs out. However, I live every single practice in the book, and it is essential to my well being because it keeps me out of balance in the ways that I typically get out of balance, or it keeps me
Mm.
in balance from getting out of balance in those ways.
Yeah. And so you talk about in the book about um, how we have to really look at the body for um, this new lens, right? To look at anxiety and understand anxiety, because for so long it was just um, an illness in the brain, or and it we disconnected it from the body. And you talk about also how it used to be at the very beginning a whole body thing. And I think that is a metaphor for so many things, for so many different areas where we just left the body behind, thinking that this intellect of ours was in control of everything, was the god of, of everything. And it has created a lot of issues and problems for us.
That's
And
right.
so I love this return in this context to the body.
This, just to help bring along anyone what we mean by this, when we're taught culturally how to think about mental health, we've all been indoctrinated with a very particular narrative that says our mental health issues, things like depression and anxiety, are the results of a genetic chemical imbalance. We use words like serotonin to describe this. We're very focused on mental health as existing from the neck up. This is where it's all happening,
Yeah.
and that it's a serotonin imbalance that can be corrected with a pill. That is an improvement upon where we came from immediately before that, where we were thinking of mental health as more of a moral infirmity. It's something that carried a lot of stigma and shame. So then we have now the disease model of mental illness that really is intended to entirely remove the stigma, and that's a good thing. And it's basically saying it's not your fault, it's genetic. And there's nothing you could really have done to prevent this. You just take
Mhm.
a pill to correct the chemical imbalance. I think it's all well-meaning. I just don't think it's accurate. And we know now, not only through large meta-analyses and an umbrella review of really all of the research we have on the serotonin basis of depression, that serotonin basis isn't really there. And I think we were already starting to suspect that because we see the variable efficacy of these medications. If there's
Mhm.
truly a chemical imbalance to fix, theoretically taking the pill that fixes it should bring people relief. But what we see instead is that they don't really separate from placebo in mild to moderate depression. We see a lot of times we see someone maybe initially having a bump, like an improvement in their symptoms that wanes over time, and then the informed consent conversation really has to take into consideration the efficacy is not as strong as we've been led to believe. It can have side effects like sexual side effects, impacts on digestion, and then the withdrawal process can be pretty harrowing if it, for some reason, you decide to get off of the medication. And all of that can leave people feeling pretty hopeless. Even just the idea that we have a genetic chemical imbalance that gives us hope initially because we think, okay, finally, I have an answer. I have a way of describing my depression. I have a treatment that's going to work. But it sets us up for despair because if you happen to be in the unlucky majority of people for whom these aren't bringing you adequate relief, then you go on this runaround where you see a psychiatrist, you see another doctor, you try this med, you add this augmentation, you increase the dose, you switch up the regimen, and you're never really getting adequate relief. And then you can
Mm.
start to think, okay, I have a chemical imbalance. It was supposed to be fixed with a pill. It wasn't fixed with a pill. So I'm screwed. And people can start to despair. And so that's where I want to come in and just say, whoa, 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 hold on a second. Healing is this mountain. We're trying to get to the top. If we can summit this mountain, that's where we feel well. That's where we're okay in our lives. And medication and psychotherapy are current offerings. That's one path up the mountain. For some people, that is the path all the way to the top. And that's great. I have nothing dogmatically against that. When that works for one of my patients, it's a victory. But I've also witnessed that that sometimes gets somebody only so far up the mountain. And at that point, what we've been doing a disservice to the population is that we've said, well, that was the path. So tough luck. And
Yeah,
instead,
this
what
is,
we
yeah.
we need to show people there are many paths up this mountain. And often we need to pivot at that point and then maybe pivot again. And it really caused me in my practice to step back and say, like, fundamentally, what is a state like depression or anxiety? Is it a Lexapro deficiency disorder? Or is there something else at play? Is it really truly entirely genetic, or are genes really only a predisposition, not a destiny? And what I've come to learn from the medical literature and from observation in my clinical practice is that a state like anxiety has modifiable root causes. Largely, it's just when the physical body gets out of balance that generates a stress response, and then we experience that stress response as anxiety. It's so often as simple as that. And
Uh,
what's causing this imbalance in these stress responses, it's pretty benign stuff. It's just that it's common. It's things like a blood sugar crash, inflammation, sleep deprivation, hormonal imbalance, digestive disturbance. And then sometimes it's not physical, sometimes it's more psychospiritual, like
yeah.
unresolved trauma, lack of community, lack of meaning, purpose, ritual, play, all of these fundamental human needs that we have that largely go unmet in the modern environment. So, all of this is to say, anxiety is not all in your head, it's largely in your body, and there's something we can do about it. We're not stuck, and there's always reason for hope.
Wow. So this is why you wrote the book, because you saw this in your practice and you wanted to be able to give an alternative or another road that didn't lead to despair, and really where your patient could be empowered by their own journey,
That's exactly right.
right? And so in the book you talk about the difference between false anxiety and true anxiety. And I thought that was wonderful because it kind of takes a bit of overwhelm for someone who's feeling just un like anxious, and wondering, right? Is this what is going on? And these things that I can actually do for myself, like you just mentioned some of those. But maybe you could tell our listeners like your how you see the difference between the two.
Yeah, so false anxiety can also be thought of as physical anxiety and, importantly, avoidable anxiety. It doesn't need to be happening. It's not some deep essential truth about us. It's uh, it's really an unnecessary suffering created by physical imbalance. And a lot of times when we're anxious, we believe it's our true anxiety. And we'll get to what that is in a second, but it's really our false anxiety. So I
Yeah.
always start there. It's the low hanging fruit, but it's also in the way. It's muddying the waters. So we can't even discern what is our true anxiety because we're just overwhelmed by the fact that we're in such a state of so much false anxiety. And false anxiety, and a clear example, I had a patient who she would have panic attacks on her commute home every day from work. And she had done many courses of cognitive behavioral therapy. She'd worked with many therapists. She had had a prescription for an SSRI and a benzodiazepine. She'd really tried so much to not have these panic attacks. And I suspected they might be related to her blood sugar. She had a high hemoglobin A1C. She was often hangry. She was eating a lunch of refined carbohydrates and then a snack of sugary foods at 3 in the afternoon. Then she'd leave the office. She'd be on a crowded subway, often freestanding. And then she'd get home and wasn't eating until dinner time, like a couple hours later. So her blood sugar was bottoming out on this commute home. So she was not willing to make dietary changes, which I understand. That was like, she was like, that would give me anxiety to
I think
to
was
overhaul my diet.
that it has such an impact. We weren't taught that, right? So I think because we don't know, and food is connected to a lot of emotions,
That's right.
insecurity, and so it's a not an easy topic to approach.
It's hard to make dietary changes, and they can generate anxiety for many reasons. And so we didn't start with dietary changes. We just had her keep a jar of almond butter at her desk at work. And then she would take a spoonful of almond butter and a sip of water before she left the office. And that was enough to stabilize her blood sugar. And she stopped having panic attacks. And so, even though this was a part of her identity, it was a diagnosis that she carried, she had done multiple modalities of treatment for it. It was really just false anxiety. It didn't need to be happening. It was
Yeah.
causing immense amounts of suffering and impacting her quality of life, but it had a physical basis. So that's a classic example of false anxiety. It also happens when we're mouth breathing, when we are staying up doom scrolling instead of getting enough sleep at night, if we're drinking and we have kind of what I would call hangxiety, like hangover anxiety the next
Sure.
day,
Yeah.
inflammation, gut health issues, hormone imbalance, and so on and so forth. And then there's true anxiety. And true anxiety is not something to pathologize. It's not something to fix. We couldn't even if we wanted to. It's purposeful anxiety. This is what centers around the inherent fragility of walking this earth in a human body, the fact that we will experience loss, that this is all impermanent. It's really centering around themes of uncertainty and control. And that's where we live in this emotion phobic culture that leads us to really want to strong arm and avoid these questions of impermanence, just sort of like pretend like it won't happen. That can feed a lot of anxiety because then we just think if I'm so hyper vigilant and always prepared, I can avoid mortality. And so instead it's arriving at a stance of trust and surrender. It's really grappling with the bigger questions of what is even happening here. And purposeful anxiety, importantly, I think it really relates to being sensitive too. And I like to empower my patients around that this is not what's wrong with you, and this is what's right with you. If you are one of our designated feelers with a wide open antenna, this is what happens when you have an intact heart, when you're feeling on behalf of the collective. So, a lot of us carry a lot of true anxiety, and it's not something to suppress, it's something to feel, to honor, to metabolize. And then unresolved traumas, I consider in the category of true anxiety, where we really want to do whatever is the treatment approach that will help bring that to a place of resolution where
Mhm.
the nervous system can recognize that was then, this is now, and it's once again safe to be in my body.
Yeah. I love the part of permission to feel in the true anxiety part of your book. And, I read a quote in Sophie Gregoire's book recently that said, like, we, um, we are miserable probably because we don't let ourselves be miserable. Like, we don't let ourselves feel. And I thought that was kind of powerful because we've learned to seek that joy and push away the pain, but the reality is that that pushing away of the pain creates the anxiety, correct? Because our heart and the vagus nerve that's wrapped around it, like, is designed to fully feel what is there. And then but we weren't really modeled that, right? So it's a little difficult to know how to do it by ourselves for the first time because maybe we were interrupted in our emotions at a certain point. So there's not that practice that, oh, I will survive this grief. I will survive this sadness. Even I will survive this joy. Like, well, shut it down is too hard. It's too much joy. So I really, really love that part on the permission to feel and then the vagus nerve and
That's beautifully said, and I think that I always wanna point out there's no blame or shame on the fact that we're not good at feeling our feelings. We come by this very honestly in this emotion-phobic culture, and we lack the modeling, we lack the container and the community that holds us through it, we lack ritual. And I think so many of us walk around with immense amounts of unfelt grief, uncried tears, and I do think it hardens our hearts and it makes us miserable. And I even crying, if you think about it, I think we're due for a cultural rebranding around crying because anytime you start to cry, we usually say, "I'm sorry."
so
We,
sorry.
we apologize for it, and then we try to seal it up as quickly as possible. It's like she who can cry the shortest amount of time wins. And I think we've got it completely opposite. Crying is not the problem. Crying is the medicine. It's
Yeah.
the wisdom of our body giving us this opportunity to have a much needed release. The way children, they're still connected to their bodies in a much more undistorted,
Yeah.
unadulterated way. So they have meltdowns because sometimes we need to release. We take in a lot. And so we need to stomp or we need to cry. And we adults are so socialized out of it, but then we're just bottling all of that. So we need to cry bigger. I thought, as a psychiatrist and a generally emotion embracing person, I thought I was good at crying. And then even when my mom passed away and I really mourned properly, like really allowed primal waves of grief to move through me. Later, when I started to work with psychedelic medicines, I was like, "Oh, I'm only just getting started," and realized that I can cry so much bigger and more effectively. And so it's really been a journey of learning how to cry in a in the real way, where it's
Love that.
I think of it
Cry
as like there's a
bigger.
false peak, like we
Yeah.
can catch our breath and think we're done, and I suspect usually we're not. We need to go back in and get all the way to the point where our face freezes in a grimace. That's a real cry.
I I did last night. I did a breath workshop. Which is rare. I don't often let myself be led by someone else, but I went to, and it's called 90 or something like that. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it's a little bit like the holotropic breath, and and there was that experience to just describe, like there were tears, there was crying, and then it wasn't over. But I could have decided it was over, but it really wasn't. And so there was this like other layer of tears and sounds that went with it. So I it's almost like I dug deeper in a place that I wouldn't just naturally go. Like I think I have an automatic reaction to I'll let myself cry, but like you mentioned, like there's an appropriate amount of sounds and water, but we're made up of mostly water, and then it's just coming out of these little holes. When you think of it, it's so impersonal, but there's all this, um, judgment around it, societal and conditioning around water coming out of these little holes.
It's just water coming out of holes. Why does it carry so much cultural baggage?
I
and
know.
and interestingly, I mean, I'm always thinking about completing the stress cycle, which is a concept of like you see an animal of prey when they have an acute life or death stressor. Afterward, they'll often shake. They'll do some practice of discharging that adrenaline, telling the nervous system that the threat has passed. And then we humans, of course, as adults, we have nothing that serves as our way of completing the stress cycle.
Yeah.
When we cry, which is one perfectly good way of completing the stress cycle, a component of the stress chain comes out in our tears. It's called ACTH, or it stands for adrenocorticotropic hormone. And that comes out of our tears, essentially cutting our stress response off at the root. And what's so fascinating is that ACTH is only present in emotional tears. Like if you're cutting an onion and crying, there's no ACTH in those tears. So this really is a mechanism that the body is using to say, let's disburden you a bit of what you're holding on to.
I love that. Oh gosh, the body's brilliant. it just knows what to do if we could just get out of the way.
Yeah.
And because we mostly live in our heads, it's hard to get out of the way. But this inviting and allowing the movement is such a different way of living. But it, like, I'm so glad. Like, I feel so lucky that I know that. And I
Yeah.
just want to share it with everybody, as
Yeah.
many people as possible.
And I think a lot about
Freedom. There's
the
a freedom there.
origins. There is a freedom to it. It's a form of sovereignty, and it goes beyond empowerment. Like it makes me brave and makes me. It's it's like a compass that I carry with me everywhere I go. My body, and I'm so grateful to have that. And I think a lot about this in the writing of the Season of the Witch book, which is like, why? What planted the seeds that got us all so disconnected from our bodies? And I see these parallels between the way we value the left hemisphere of the brain over the right, the way we value yang qualities over yin qualities. If you think about the yin yang, yang being the more masculine sun, productivity, action energy, yin being that moon, feminine, receptivity, intuition energy. And we value material things that can be proven over what's mysterious. We value certainly everything of the mind over the heart, everything of the distraction over the embodied. And, ultimately we value the doctor over the witch. And I think that there was some story of control and misogyny that I think is at the root of this, because I
And fear,
suspect,
fear of the power of it too, I think.
yeah, that's right. And
Because that feminine energy gives birth to life.
yeah, I think that might have always been a little bit feared as a threat, because it's a way it can't be overpowered through strength.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it can't. It's the ground of everything. And so the mystery of its eternity is uncomfortable
Yeah,
to people, or to consciousness who like to have power or control.
yeah. I think about how, like when I was pregnant, which I think is a state where you have a bit of a dialed up antenna for evolutionary reasons and maybe for mystical reasons. I remember having, not always, but sometimes, uh, an embodied knowing that carried a lot of conviction with it. And I remember it kind of making my husband a little uncomfortable. It's sort of like, well, how can we know that without the data? And I think that if you don't have a uterus, or if you don't, if you, there's ways that I feel like I have this added antenna that I have a felt experience with bodily knowing that's just a little bit more clear than anything he's felt. And so it understandably makes him uncomfortable, where it's like,
Yeah.
I think we should do the blood test. I think we need the data, because like we're shooting in the dark here. And
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
I don't feel like I'm shooting in the
Yeah.
dark. I feel like I have a clarion call from
Yeah.
within.
Yeah. I'm not, I have a knowing, and I think a lot of our work is about building that trust with ourselves, especially as someone who has a uterus, um, trusting that sense. Um, because it's such a subjective experience and a personal experience that often we don't have those outside validation for it.
Yeah.
And but it's the most powerful wisdom we have access to. And to own that changes our lives.
And I want to also add, if for whatever reason someone listening doesn't have a uterus, that doesn't mean you don't have access to this kind of knowing and antenna. There's many antennas in our bodies. That's just that example of, like, while pregnant, I felt like we were seeing in such different ways. But
Yeah.
I feel like our gut is an antenna.
Yeah.
I feel like our heart is an antenna. Even just the hairs standing up on the back of our necks, all of it is a way that the body is picking up on signals and communicating it to us.
Yes, because in the in all bodies, there's this second chakra of the, which is just this beautiful ground of where something can be created, right? So we all have this connection. Well, we all have all energy centers, but I just related to this ground that gives birth. I think we all have access to that
That's right.
in our bellies.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's there's a part in your book where you talk about AA and also um behavioral therapy. I just want to find it because I thought it was pretty incredible. Um, okay, I think it's over here. So if you don't mind, I'll just read a little bit. So it's from Holly Whittaker's book, Quit Like a Woman, which is a great title.
Yeah.
Alcoholics Anonymous created in the 1930s by upper middle class white men, offers guidelines known as the 12 steps that don't fundamentally address women's need. And then it says to be reminded you're not God, to become right sized, to refrain from questioning rules, to humble yourself, to admit your weakness, to chronicle what's wrong about you, to be vulnerable enough to admit your faults to another person, to shut up and listen. These are all behaviors associated with and imposed on women, she writes. And there's a link and a parallel with cognitive behavioral therapy, correct? Where it was also more in that more masculine patriarchal way of looking at mental illness and disease. Can you tell me more about, because I feel like that's like a connection to your next book, The Season of the Witch.
That's right. And the Holly Whitaker quote, it ends with a phrase where she basically says something like, for men, these things like being right sized and realizing you're not God, she's like, for men, these were medicine. But for women, it was more of the same shit that made us sick in the first place.
Mhm.
And so that, I think she's brilliant. And I feel that in cognitive behavioral therapy because it does sometimes strike me as a bit of a gaslighting modality, which is saying you you're having all these feelings and they're irrational. And I tend to
Emotional reasoning is not to be trusted, is what you wrote.
yeah.
Yeah, like
And
as in that context.
I won't say CBT doesn't have a place. Like I practice it sometimes. It has a place. It certainly can be useful. But there is something that I'll always bristle at about it because it feels almost like that cliche of a man and a woman sitting on the couch and the woman saying, I have a headache, and the man coming up with solutions like, you should try this, you should. And maybe she really just needs to feel heard and validated in that moment. She doesn't want a solution. And, I mean, headache is not the right example there. It's really more like, I'm feeling sad. And it's, well, okay, you should try this. You could, and it's like, no, no, no. I actually don't want a solution right now. I want to feel heard. I want to feel witnessed.
Yeah.
I want to be validated in my pain. And I find CBT to be so invalidating in someone's pain. And it's basically saying you're feeling sad for irrational reasons. And I tend to think that we don't. I tend to think that we don't. I
No.
think that we have all kinds of stories going on in our minds, and it's very healthy to examine those stories, to see what are our automatic thoughts, to see where we have a distorted sense of reality. But that kernel of emotion in the body, I usually want to validate. And I think that there is sophistication to those emotions that's well beyond what we can even evaluate when we're looking at someone's thoughts. And so I just don't ever want to say to someone like that's, um, like that we need to somehow invalidate that feeling that you're having in your body. And I do relate it to CBT 'cause or to AA because I think that um, I think it can. These are things that can sometimes be more effective for men and can be more of the same shit for women.
Yeah. There's always an intelligence to the emotion, whether or not you're with the root of the emotion or you're with the story of the emotion. There's always a path back to an imbalance or a hurt, a moment where there wasn't that ability to, like you said, completing the stress cycle. Um, and so, like, if we could all learn the language around that way of knowing ourselves and learn to decode how our emotions talk to us and what, and what they're trying to bring us back to. None of them are happening by happenstance.
That's right. It's on ultimately the body is communicating to us constantly. It can't speak to us in words. It speaks in sensations. It speaks in the fleeting sadness that needs to be witnessed. My friend Erica Matluck, she's a nurse practitioner and a naturopath. She takes this a whole step farther, where she talks about how people in her family were having allergies, and someone's like, "Oh, I have a great, naturopath you can go see, and she'll give you this whatever it is, some kind of tincture, some kind of remedy, and then allergies will be gone." And she's like, "No, I don't want them to be gone. I want to first understand what they're communicating." And she's
What?
like, "Is this telling us this house is not healthy? This city isn't a good match for us?" She's like, "You don't want to suppress the symptom, whether it's through conventional medication or even the more natural homeopathic, like all these other ways that we can still suppress symptoms. You don't want to suppress it before you've gotten the message."
Yeah, exactly. So that you can work with it and be friends with it. And then, um, if something needs to move and return home, then that's, you want to be there for that. You want to be present for that. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's um there's a part in your book where you towards the end where you talk about you say burnout oh no, it's a quote from, I can't remember her name.
Probably, what is her name? Amelia, am I forgetting right now? The book Burnout,
Um I will find it.
or maybe Brené Brown.
No.
Okay. Let's edit out our
I
musings on
yeah,
whose quote
just
it is.
this long pause. Um, so it's burnout exists because we've made rest a reward rather than a right.
Yeah.
And I thought that was such a permission giving like statement. Um, and I was in my kitchen, just writing notes about our conversation today. And my son this morning, he's 20, almost 21, and he's worked all week and he slept in, he's tired, he slept in, he's making coffee. And I just say it. I say, burnout exists because we've made rest a reward rather than a right. And he collapsed to the ground. And he was like, that is a lot to tell me right now. He said, on my first day of rest, after I've worked so hard, it feels like a reward. And then I told him I was talking to you, and I thought, I said, well, I'll ask her, because for him, he was like, because for me, I need to hear that because type A, Capricorn, like, and always trying to do more. And it has definitely been a coping mechanism from my childhood where it was never enough, right? And so for me to hear that, I needed that. For him, he thought, well, will that hold me from my ambition? So I thought I'd ask you, like, will that hold me from, he said, now you can say that because you've done all those things, but I still have all those things to do. So I thought that was interesting. I wanted to bring that up.
Let's muse on it. And what a wise 21-year-old. So it's the way I think about it ties in with all of this cultural bias that we have. And if you look at the yin yang symbol, we talked briefly about it, yang, productivity, action, doing, masculine, sun energy. Our culture is obsessed with that half of the yin yang. Yin, that rest, receptivity, non-doing, surrender, intuition, witchy, feminine moon stuff. That is what we systematically devalue. And so, is there a role for industriousness and hard work? Absolutely. For survival, for ambition, for making our art, whatever form that takes, which can be our contribution to the collective. It can be building a brick house, it can be writing a song, it can be anything.
Feeling fulfilled, like,
And
oh, I've fulfilled this desire or this project or Mhm.
yeah, and just sort of taken the assignment that was maybe divinely handed to us and said, okay, like challenge accepted. I will go to work on this. But I think we just need to keeping ourselves honest that we are living in a time where instead of the yin yang being this perfect dynamic equilibrium, it's this bloated yang and this squished little sliver of yin, and it's gotten us out of balance. It generates burnout. And once we're burned out, we are not making our contribution. We are not actually dialed into our ambition. So we can be running on fumes for a while, but that's not actually where we access that second chakra, creative source energy, and carry out and give birth to our contribution. So I'm all for industriousness and ambition. Capricorn rising. I work hard, but I value rest, and I see the inherent value in it, and I don't shame myself for it. I watch myself talk when I'm having an unproductive day instead of being like, oh, I was so lazy, slothful, I didn't accomplish anything, I was unproductive. I really embrace the inherent value of yin, of rest. And I think the female reproductive cycle is a beautiful sort of framework for the yin yang, but we've moved so far away from being in tune with our cycles or even allowing our cycles to exist as they're meant to. But it's a perfect balance. The follicular phase is very yang, is very outward facing. We have good energy. We want to engage with the world, but then it accelerates towards ovulation just as the yang kind of crescendos, and then that becomes the turning point into yin, where then we want to start taking more Epsom salt baths and eating a large bowl of mashed potatoes and saying no to plans. And can we, especially women, allow our bodies to move through that natural balance of yin and yang in the course of any given month? And can we not have a negative association with those more yin qualities of rest that come up in the luteal phase?
Yeah.
So to answer your son's question, like he should work hard when he wants to work hard, and he will ultimately go farther if he builds in rest, but more importantly, even his own valuing of rest stays intact. He doesn't let the cultural bias of productivity is all that we value. Don't let that get to his head.
Mhm. Yeah, I love that so much, and I think do you think that men would, without that cycle, would actually tap into that as well with the moon and just the seasons and the day and the night and
My understanding is that men are on a solar cycle. Like we are on this 28-day lunar cycle, and men are on a 24-hour solar cycle. So they do need to rest on a daily basis at night.
I love that. That's great. Oh, I love that. Um, okay, so I know we're coming up to towards the end of our conversation, but I could talk to you all day.
Feel the same.
I'm really curious about like what's exciting for you and right now, and what is the edge of your own evolution right now? Like
Just want to
what's
pause and
yeah.
give silence to integrate that question, which is amazing. Um, what's exciting to me right now is okay, two things. One is just all the questions around mystery. Because I am writing this book about witchiness, but I am myself quite left brained quite like I really understood that assignment and internalized being rational, looking at the data and the evidence. Like, I'm not the witchiest of people, even though I'm writing about witches. But what's exciting to me is increasingly we just have corroboration of the fact that the world is weirder and fuzzier and more mysterious than we're taught to believe. And I like the quantum revolution that shows us that up until recently, we had the God of the gaps thinking. It's like God caused the weather and God is angry at you, and that's why you have this illness. And like, no, we have like communicable diseases and tectonic plate movements. And that's, science came in and took God out of the conversation of why are these things happening. And I think where we're getting to now is when we look really closely, when our instruments get more refined, more powerful, and we look closer at the subatomic level, it went right back to being weird again. And and it's like we could see clearer and clearer and clearer, and then the closer we got, now we can see not clearly at all. And it's like, so it turns out an electron doesn't decide where it is until we observe it.
Yeah.
Like, what in the world is that?
Yeah.
And so I really
Who's in
like
charge? What's
that.
in
Well,
charge?
the
Yeah.
universe refuses to play by our material, mechanical rules. And to me, that opens up so much permission for being with mystery and just exploring that edge. What's the edge of my evolution right now? I think
What's the
that
cliff that you're kind of standing on?
the
Like
cliff.
this little, oh.
I think that with this second book that I'm writing, I'm I'm no longer just a doctor writing a prescriptive nonfiction book. I'm attempting in certain chapters to make art and to take what's alive in me and birth it onto the page in a way that will, I don't know, make other humans feel less alone, give us a way of holding the inexplicable aspects of the human experience. And so that's new for me. And I never really saw that coming. I just happened to feel like I had this divine mission to write this book. And as I've been doing the improvisational jazz jam session with myself, that's what's emerged. But it's brand new to be like, hey, wait a minute, I'm not just a clinician here. This is me bleeding on the page. This is art. And
Art. You're an art.
that's exciting and nerve wracking. And it's so vulnerable. It's so vulnerable. And I have so much appreciation for all of our artists, all of our musicians, everyone who takes what's alive in them, bleeds it into their medium, and puts it out into the world. And man, does it enrich all of the rest of our lives. But it's so raw. It's paper thin. It's just your heart out in the world. And people can be like, but that's not good. And
Yeah.
it has to
Or
hurt.
I don't understand it, or I can't relate to it, or
Yeah.
this is so different than how I know you.
Yeah.
That's one of my fears.
Say more about that.
That it this part of me is so new. It's old, ancient, but new to the way I present myself or express myself in the world, or I'm seen. That it's that little girl's fear, like that I won't be recognized, or even relevant is
Ugh.
huge for me. I won't be relevant with this. This is not relevant to anyone or anything. It's just my and then the being recognized or being accepted. And I think there's a constant letting go of that because or else the book wouldn't come through. But I feel that in the back of my heart a lot. It's
I
like,
sh
this is not smart.
I share that. I share that. I know the kind of book I could write that would get people's respect. I could
Exactly.
write that, but it is
Exactly.
not my truth. And so instead I'm flying this kamikaze mission into woo-woo.
Oh,
And I have a lot of trouble thinking about my audience being anything other than anonymous people who don't know me. Because when I think about someone I went to high school or med school with, I feel like No, no, no. They think of me as this credible, evidence-based, rigorous academic clinician, and they'll read this and they'll think, what happened to Ellen? And it's very vulnerable. So I've decided in a very slightly neurodivergent way that my audience is God.
Ah,
Is
oh,
that
that's beautiful.
that this is basically a mission. It's saying, like, someone needs to write this book. We think you might be the right person for the job. Do you accept this mission? I say yes. I run off. I do the best darn job I can do, considering I'm juggling it with being a mom and being a doctor and all the other rings of my circus. And then it's, I hope I did right by this mission. Here it is.
I love that. I love that. My audience is God. That's so helpful. Thank you for saying that. That's
At least
very helpful.
10% of the time I manage to believe that. The other 90, I'm thinking, God, it's probably somebody I went to med school with, and they will
Yeah.
judge.
And I think it must be like some kind of box in our minds, or in my mind anyway, that says that this identity that those people have seen you like is protecting me from some kind of hurt that's
Yeah.
not real. But it was there maybe when I was younger, that when I made sense, when I made sense and I was smart, then I belonged and I was safe and all that, right? So it's like it's not logical, because who cares about these people when you really think about it? Like, but it feels almost like a little irrational box that is trying to keep me from getting hurt, or from like losing the love that will keep me alive.
I'll meet that and say it is a bit real and it is a bit rational. It's just myopic because there is hurt to alienation, to judgment. It matters. Being
Matters.
accepted in the tribe matters. But I think that it's like a lowercase h hurt that we have when we're judged. And there's a capital H hurt that's more like when we don't stay in alignment with our truth. And I always think about this Indigo Girls lyric, and I think the song is Second Time Around. And they're like, the thing I've learned about compromise is don't do it if it hurts inside. And they're like, either way, you're screwed and eventually something. But so basically, I just think about the first part. It's like, I could compromise my authenticity here and be more accepted. But if I get that embodied communication of that hurts, then like you might as well go and just dive headfirst into that lowercase h hurt, because it's actually a better hurt to feel than the bigger hurt of you've um, you've not been true to yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. And it propels the art
That's right.
to go on that path. Oh, Ellen, it was so good. Just heart filling to be in conversation with you today.
I really feel that. I feel just brimming with love and appreciation for you, Anne. Thank you.
Thank you for the work you do.
Thank you.
Mwah.
Mwah.
Hey, thank you for listening. There can be a lot of noise and inauthenticity on the spiritual path. I help spiritual seekers experience embodied spirituality. To learn how, visit my website at anneberube.com and click on the Start Here page. Oh, and subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already. Until next time, be well.
On the street, they say that you don't care about me anymore, but you know it's in the way they walk, in the way they talk. I don't believe a thing, I don't believe a thing they say. You know I love you anyway, anytime, any place. You mean the world to me. You mean everything to me. And that's why I say, this is your life, this is your